Silence has a weight that the heart can no longer disguise. It's not about what was said, it's about what will never be said again. Because there comes a time when the sound of absence screams louder than any presence ever did. And you notice. Not immediately, not clearly, but you do notice. It's when the body is still breathing, but the soul stumbles in a space that has gone empty. It's when the bed remains on the same side, but the warmth no longer knows where to hide. It's when the notification doesn't come, and that in itself is already an answer. You thought you knew what presence was. You thought it was simply being close, chatting a bit, sharing days, laughing at trivial things. But now you understand. True presence is when someone occupies spaces in you that you didn't even know existed. And absence isn't just being far away. Absence is being close to everything, except for what made sense. It's amazing how you only realize how important something was when you try to fill the gaps left behind. But you don't fill them. You try to move on, try to distract yourself. But everything seems to echo the name of that absence. That's when you understand that love doesn't scream at the peak. It screams in the aftermath. It screams when you hear a song that used to be just a song, and now it has turned into a lament. It screams when you pass by any place and feel your body freeze with a memory you didn't ask for, and no one notices. Only you. Because only you feel this emptiness that carries a name, a scent, a touch, a tone of voice, and even that laughter you thought you didn't miss. But you do, and you can't explain it. Because those looking from the outside see everything apparently in its place. You keep going out, working, responding to messages, but inside, it's as if something is always behind. As if your presence is here, but your soul is still returning from some place where it got stuck, and you try to convince yourself that it was better this way, that the distance was good for you, that some things are lost because time demands choices. But the heart doesn't understand logic. It only feels. And feeling, at times, is the worst kind of perception. Because when you realize you loved, there's no one left there to love. It's cruel. You wish it had been different, maybe more presence, less pride, more listening, less ready responses, more honesty, less fear of seeming fragile, more time given, less time counted. But now it's too late, and all that's left is this silent scream, this whisper that only you hear, this absence that doesn't announce its arrival, but settles into every detail of your day. You start to remember the little things, the gestures that seemed silly, the way that person said your name, the way the silences between you didn't weigh heavy but brought comfort. Today the silence weighs. It weighs so much that you feel your body tiring from pretending everything is fine. There comes a time when even your body realizes. It begins to grow sick from the inside, not with fever or any apparent pain, but with a sadness that spreads slowly. That sadness that doesn't stop you from smiling, but turns every smile into an effort. That sadness that no one understands, but that you carry in your gaze. You begin to avoid certain places, certain songs, certain dates, not because you've moved on, but because each of them reminds you that you haven't. And it's not drama, it's not childish attachment. It's just the heart learning in the hardest way what true love was. Because sometimes love isn't what makes the heart race, but what, when it disappears, slows everything down. You're trying to rebuild. You introduce new people, new places, new distractions, but you realize that no sound is as loud as the absence of someone who was truly present. And this teaches you something. It teaches you that love isn't just about meeting, it's about caring. It's a presence that lingers even when the person has left. It's a mark that doesn't fade with time, because it was made in the soul, not on the skin. Have you ever experienced this? Tell me in the comments. And the worst part isn't what was lived. The worst part is what wasn't. The conversations you saved for later. The gestures you postponed for when you had the time. The words you swallowed because you thought the other person would understand even without hearing them. But no one understands what isn't said. No one feels what isn't shown. And time, as cruel as it is, takes away even what seemed eternal. You try to rationalize, you tell yourself it was just a phase, that everyone has their own path. But there's something inside that won't be convinced, something that insists on repeating. You let it slip away. And when you realize this, there's no going back. There's no more room to relearn what time took away. All that remains is silence. The silence of someone who could have lived something immense but chose to survive on crumbs. Does this make sense to you so far? Write yes down below. And it's not about blaming yourself, it's about recognizing, because awareness isn't punishment, it's growth. Perception is the portal to something more genuine, and even if it hurts, even if it breaks you, even if it shatters your foundations, it sets you free. You start to see yourself more honestly. You notice where you lost your way. You remember the times when pride spoke louder than the desire to stay. The times you distanced yourself even when you were close, because absence also resides in negligence, in camouflaged disinterest, in the excess certainty that the other would never leave. But they did. And now you walk among the shards of that absence, trying to understand exactly where everything fell apart. Some days are easier. You distract yourself, laugh, fill your mind. But just a scent, a phrase, a forgotten photo, and everything comes rushing back as if it never left. And the longing is treacherous. It disguises itself as a memory, but carries the pain of everything that wasn't lived as it could have been. Have you heard that phrase before? Comment. Yes, I have. And even with all this, even with the pain, with the absence, with the late realization, there's still a small flame that burns. A desire for a reunion, perhaps. Not necessarily with that person, but with the kind of love you felt when you were with them. You don't want to go back to the past, you want to feel again what made you feel alive. And this is the beginning of healing. Realizing that what you lost wasn't just someone. It was a part of you that only existed in the presence of that love. But if it existed once, it can exist again. Not the same. Not with the same people, nor in the same scenarios, but with the same depth, with the same commitment, with the same truth, and this time perhaps with more presence. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt anymore. You don't have to say it was just a phase. You can look at this silence and name it. You can accept that you loved, that you felt, that you gave yourself, that you erred, that you lost. But above all, you realized, and maybe now you understand, that loving was never about getting it right all the time. It was about being whole even when everything around you was half. You may have made mistakes, you may have hoped for too much, you may have said too little, but you no longer deny that you felt, and that changes everything. Because those who feel transform, even when they lose. The pain of absence is not just loss, it is also a mirror. It shows you who you were, but also reveals who you can still be. You begin to notice the patterns, the unresolved silences, the neglected needs, the escapes you called freedom. You start to see that it wasn't about the other person understanding you. It was about allowing yourself to be seen fully, no filter, no armor, without the fear of seeming too much. Because those who are afraid of seeming too much have usually felt too little their entire lives. And maybe you lived this story trying to prove that you were enough, trying to fit in, trying to please, trying not to lose. And in that effort, you lost yourself. Have you ever gone through this? Share your thoughts in the comments. But now something is changing. Silence is no longer just pain. It begins to show you details you didn't see before. You realize where you were insisting out of fear, where you gave in out of insecurity, where you tolerated absences while waiting for presences that never arrived, where you confused intensity with depth, and you see that not every love that marked you was good for you. But all of them taught you something. Some taught you about boundaries, others about the value of being heard, others about the importance of choosing yourself before being chosen. You thought it was about having someone, but now you understand. It's about not losing yourself while trying not to lose the other. And in this place, in this space where absence no longer suffocates as it used to, you start to breathe more truly, not like someone who has forgotten, but like someone who has integrated, because maturing is just that, stopping the running away from what hurt and starting to dialogue with it. You sit with your wounds, you look into the eyes of your longings, and you let the pain tell you everything you refuse to hear. You don't have to pretend you've moved on anymore, but you also don't need to drown in what has passed. You now walk with more lightness, because you realized there's a kind of love that, even lost, remains in you as strength. That love sculpted you. It made you someone more attentive, more sensitive, more capable of noticing the small signs before they become glaring absences. And it's this sensitivity that begins to guide you, Not fear, not neediness, not blind longing, but awareness. You've realized that there are things nobody else will give you the way that person did, but you also know there are things you can still give to yourself. With more presence, more awareness, more courage, life continues to offer you paths, and even if some seem similar to those that hurt you, you now see with different eyes. You no longer enter any story, not out of pride, but out of respect for what you've learned. Absence taught you to recognize presence. Pain taught you to acknowledge care. Longing taught you to love with more urgency, but with less desperation, because loving is not losing yourself in someone else. It's finding yourself in the encounter. It's being two whole individuals who choose to share, not two empties trying to complete each other. Does this make sense to you so far? Write yes below. And it's at this point where you realize you've survived, that something inside begins to blossom again. It's not about hope in someone else, it's faith in yourself. You look at yourself with more tenderness. You start to speak to yourself with more patience. You make peace with the parts of you that once silenced themselves to maintain the love of another. You're no longer begging for attention. You're no longer forcing presence. You're no longer sacrificing your essence out of fear of being alone. You understood that being alone hurts, but being poorly accompanied makes you sick. And now you prefer real silence over the empty noise of someone who is there but not truly present. You look back and can no longer deny that you loved. But you don't romanticize it either. You know you tried. You know you gave what you could. You know you were genuine. And that is enough. What the other did with what you gave is no longer your responsibility. You now choose with more wisdom, because you know where it hurt. You know what you lost. You know what you don't want to repeat. But most importantly, because you realized it wasn't in vain. Absence hurt you, yes, but it also cleansed you. Cleansed you of illusions, cleansed you of idealizations, cleansed you of versions of yourself that no longer fit. And now you walk lighter, not because you've forgotten, but because you've transformed. Transformed pain into perception, absence into the presence of self, emptiness into fertile space, and in that space, something new begins to grow, a new way of loving, more lucid, more calm, more true. You don't know when, nor with whom, but you feel it. You feel that it wasn't the end, it was just preparation. Because there are pains that are not endings, they are disguised beginnings. And when you truly realize this, then nothing will ever be the same. You went through all of this in silence, holding inside what no one could hear. You had to learn to rebuild yourself, without a manual, without a map, without applause. Because the pain of absence doesn't make for a pretty post. It's not bar conversation material. You don't share it on your feed with a filter. It's an invisible yet vivid pain. A pain that only those who have lost someone still living understand. The worst absence isn't that of someone who has died. It's that of someone who chose to leave, even when they could have stayed. And in that space, without answers, you matured. Not because you wanted to, but because life gave you no choice. You were forced to look within. You had to understand your own emptiness, to hear your own breath echoing in the silence of rooms that once were full of presence. And as tough as it was, you didn't break. You bent. You fell. Cried where no one could see. Questioned if you were still worthy of love. But you didn't break. And just for that, you have already won more than you realize, because staying whole in a world that teaches you to numb yourself is courage. You have courage. Even when you say you don't. Even when you think you don't feel anything anymore, you do feel. You just got tired of showing it to those who couldn't perceive it. But this awareness that wounds you is the same that one day will heal you, because the deeper you feel, the freer you become. Free from the fear of being alone. Free from the idea that you have to deserve love. Free from the patterns that always led you to the same place. And now you start to love differently. You no longer seek the other as an escape, but as a mirror. Someone who sees you with the right eyes, without trying to fix what doesn't need fixing, without projecting their own wounds onto your silence. You no longer want games. You don't want shallow relationships with pretty words and empty gestures. You want truth, presence, reciprocity without drama. And that's not asking for too much. It's just about stopping to accept less. Have you noticed how you once held back out of fear of bothering others? You've stayed quiet for too long to avoid losing. You've shaped yourself so much that you almost didn't recognize yourself anymore. But now it's different. You finally understood. Anyone who needs you to be smaller to love you doesn't know how to love, and you no longer want that kind of love because you've experienced it. And it hurt. You want to be you, with your intensity, with your sensitivity, with your keen perception that sees what no one else can. You want someone who notices without you needing to explain. Someone who stays, not out of dependency, but out of daily choice. And that choice starts with you. Today, when you decide that you will no longer lose yourself for anyone, when you promise yourself that from now on, you won't ignore the signs, when you commit to not romanticize what hurts, to not beg for what should be natural, to not plead for presence when what you offer is commitment, because the love you deserve doesn't weigh you down, doesn't make you doubt, doesn't make you feel less. The love you deserve doesn't disappear, it remains. With words, with gestures, with subtle touches. It doesn't vanish when the other person is in a bad mood. It doesn't dissolve when you make a mistake. It stays. And even when it doesn't know what to do, it chooses not to walk away. You realize this late, but there is still time to love yourself first, time to respect yourself as a starting point, time to look at yourself with the same tenderness you've always extended to others. I know you still miss it. It still hurts. There are still days when everything comes flooding back, when absence invades your chest like a cold wave. But now you know what to do with it. You no longer run away from yourself. You sit, you listen, you feel, you integrate. And gradually, what was once pain transforms into wisdom. What was loss becomes a passage, and what seemed like the end reveals itself as the beginning of a new version of you. More whole, more clear-headed, more perceptive. This pain has shaped you, but it hasn't defined you. You carry on with your head held high, your heart more aware, and a soul that even when scarred still chooses to believe, because you know, true love doesn't hurt, it doesn't confuse, it doesn't disappear when you need it most. True love remains perceptible, even in silence, and when it comes, because it will come, you will recognize it, not by what the person says, but by the peace they bring, by the space they respect, by a presence that doesn't weigh you down, by a touch that doesn't demand, by a gaze that doesn't judge. And then, everything will make sense. But until then, take care of yourself as if you were cherishing something sacred, because you are. You are a temple, you are a path, you are a refuge, and those who can appreciate this will know how to stay. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment below. I needed to hear this. Or tell me, what absence still cries out inside you? What was the hardest silence you've ever had to face? If you felt like this conversation was for you, as if I was speaking to the part of you that you still can't say out loud, give it a like. That shows me and the algorithm that this kind of content needs to continue to be shared. And if you want to keep receiving these messages that touch where nothing else does, subscribe to the channel now. There are no ready-made formulas or empty motivation here. Just words with soul, deep insight, and genuine presence. Subscribe, comment, leave a like, and stay with me, because this conversation, this journey, this healing is still just beginning.